A warm welcome to Sandhan. Today we are here to discuss a very interesting topic. I, Madhurita Chaudhary from MS University Baroda, and my friend Dr. Zakia Firdaus, again from MS University Baroda, are going to discuss a very important, a very significant topic of English literature, and that is Oscar Wilde's The Importance of Being Earnest. Zakia, have you heard about a few epigrammatic quotations? For example, no man is rich enough to buy back his past, or men become old but they never become good. These topics, these quotations have a terrific sense of humor. Can you identify the writer?
Certainly, that's Oscar Wilde, the man in question whom we are going to interrogate for our students today.
Yes, our presentation is based on three categories. The first is author and his biography. Then we have the age, that is the Victorian age from which Oscar Wilde belonged to, and the play. And then we will also critique the play in detail. Oscar Wilde, can you please introduce Oscar Wilde?
Well, the complete name of this great legendary figure was Oscar Fingal O'Flynn Wills Wilde. And his date of birth, 1854, 16th October 1854 to 30th November 1900. Going back to his parentage, he belonged to two very important personalities of Ireland. Especially they are called as the Dublin intellectual. His mother was a forthright activist, wrote poems for young Irelanders. Her name was Jane Francisca Wilde, and she wrote under the pseudonym Speranza, meaning Italian word for hope. Sir William Wilde, his father, was a very influential ophthalmologist, an ear and eye surgeon, and was knighted in the year 1864 for his medical services, as well as being equally involved in the area of peasants' folklore and Irish archaeology. He was also a renowned philanthropist. Going back to the educational profile of this great literary figure, he was associated with the Dublin and Oxford universities, and especially he was trained in reading classics and reading greats, which are the Oxford prescribed courses on classical literature. His tutors were Walter Pater and John Ruskin, who in fact revolutionized his own way of looking at the society and also at literature. After university, he moved to London into fashionable cultural and social circles. And he was also prosecuted for libel, a charge for the act of presenting defamatory material to the public. However, we have seen that he has made few exoduses in his life, from London to America, again back to London. And he was also involved in a great aesthetic movement for which he was hugely criticized in the press and in the media. Apart from that, his long association with Robert Ross was against the unrestrained prohibition of Victorian against homosexuality. However, his last days he spent in France and never returned to Ireland. He died as a destitute at the age of 46. But more importantly, he is considered as the leader of the aesthetic movement that advocated arts for art's sake.
Isn't this movement proposed and propagated by Walter Pater?
Certainly. And his training under him was the reason that he was able to locate literature not just as a reading narrative, but as a refined form of art.
A kind of refusal to accept reality, a kind of taking art for art's sake, so moving away from, escaping from reality.
That's right. To a certain extent, yes, but then he has written a lot which is a part of the reality for which he was equally questioned.
Right.
Anyway, now we come back to his literary achievements. we are here to discuss him as a dramatist, but more importantly, his interests were in journalism. He was the editor of the Ladies' World. His shorter fiction, as we can see on the slide, The Happy Prince, The Other Tales, Lord Arthur Saville's Crime and Other Stories, The House of Pomegranate, The Portrait of Mr. W.H., essays and dialogues, The Soul of Man Under Socialism, The Decay of Lying, and The Critic as an Artist. The fiction includes the picture of Dorian Gray, published as the lead story in July 1890 edition of the Lipicon's monthly magazine. More importantly, now we move on to his long list of plays, and it begins with, as we can see on the slide again, Salomé 1893, written in French, translated by Lord Alfred Douglas. Later Windermere's Fan, A Woman of No Importance, An Ideal Husband, and The Importance of Being Earnest, which was first performed at St. James Theatre, London on February 14, 1895.
The Importance of Being Earnest, if we may remark, it is one of the last plays of Oscar Wilde, and that is the discussion of our topic today.
Since the writer belongs to the Victorian period, I think it becomes imperative for us to know where and how we locate this Victorian period. Primarily, it is divided into two parts, the early and the later part. The first part, as you can see, it's from 1837 to 1870, and 1817 downwards to 1901 is the period of the second movement of Victorian era, where the artist in question is located. But going back before to the play, it's imperative to know what this age was all about. As the name suggests, Queen Victoria was a reigning monarch. It was the most volatile period in the history of British literature and also in the history of British political arena. One of the reasons was the strong influence of the Industrial Revolution, which had grossly questioned the established belief systems and had in fact influenced writers in trying to locate themselves as independent identities, as well as the concerns of the nation. So there was a kind of a duality often being located as in a very oft-quoted phrase, which is part of the Victorian temper, or the way we locate Victorian temper is this whole question of Victorian compromise. Now people like Tennyson, Browning, Meredith, Hardy, they all have been questioning this in their writing, where the self and the nation are at war or are at the crossroad. And we do find also a glimpse of this when we go back again to this writer in question. However, one thing is very significant here when we look at the age, especially when we look the way Thomas Carlyle, a noted critic, has talked about it. What he says that it was a time where there was a movement from the movement of levity and play to a more grave, serious world. In other words, it was a movement towards serious questioning, which was brought because of the result of the theories propounded by Charles Darwin, which had shook the very establishment of what is called Christian theology, and more importantly, the position of man in society. These are the repercussions that we find also in the world of literature, including fiction and drama, and the play that we are discussing today somewhere tries to address that issue as well. Now, as I said earlier, that he belongs to the second phase of the Victorian age, and then it's important again to know how do we then locate this man as part of the later Victorian era. So what is important in the late Victorian era was that the whole question of earnestness was being debated. Now earnestness became the not the talk of the town, but the way you are conducting yourself.
So okay, that is very interesting to know. What is the meaning of earnestness? Since we are discussing the play, and the title of the play is The Importance of Being Earnest. So what is earnestness? In fact, earnestness comprises of two things. One is the quality of being sincere and the quality of being serious, and both have been critiqued by Oscar Wilde through this play, which is a very important thing to note.
Yeah, exactly. And the best part is the second half of the title, which actually is a pun on what is being earnest. And if we go back to the full title, The Importance of Being Earnest, a trivial comedy for serious people. The word trivial and the word serious they run together with a very serious mission by the writer, which we'll explore in the later part of our deliberation. Anyway, coming back, let us move on to the slide again. The full title, as you can see here, is Importance of Being Earnest, a Trivial Comedy for Serious People. The genre, yes, it has intermingling of genres. It's a social comedy, it's a comedy of manners, a satire, and intellectual farce. That makes it even more interesting play, which has so many connotations in terms of form and also interpretation to the narrative.
So it has a society, it has the manners of the society,
That's
it has a satirical way of looking at society, and it also has intellectual perspective towards the society. All the things are comprised together.
And more importantly, the idea of play and fun, which
And
is
brought
equally
together.
serious.
Right.
And that's the highlight of this playwriter, that how does he infuse this element of seriousness into the frame of farce.
Right.
That's right. Anyway, so we go back again to the slide. The time and place is summer 1894, Worthing, England. Date of first production, February 14, 1895. It was not published until 1899. The publishers were L. Smithers, and certainly since it belongs to the genre of satire and farce, it is gone for conclusion that the tone had to be light, amusing, lively, and misleadingly frivolous. Misleadingly
that is
frivolous.
something fascinating, because it is frivolous and yet it is misleading. So
Misleading.
in a way the play is being used to critique something. In a way the play is being used to be sarcastic at something.
That's right, that's right. And that is why the word earnest is
So important.
connotated in such a way in the dynamics of the characters and also in the dynamics of the Victorian representation of human behavior.
That's right.
Right. Okay, now we move on to these important characters. And as you can look at the slide again, the first one who is the protagonist, Jack Ernest Worthing. The play's protagonist is seemingly a responsible and respectable young man who leads a double life. In Hertfordshire, where he has a country estate, Jack is known as Jack. In London, he is known as Ernest. As a baby, Jack was discovered in a handbag in the cloakroom of Victorian Station by an old man who adopted him and subsequently made Jack guardian to his granddaughter, Cicely Cardew. Jack is in love with his friend Algernon's cousin, Gwendolen Fairfax. The initials after his name indicate that he is a justice of peace. The second character, Algernon Moncrieff, again is the secondary hero. Algernon is a typically charming bachelor representing the gentry, the Victorian gentry. And he also is someone who is after the whole question of being earnest, though he is not claimed to be earnest, but he also creates another foil to the earnest in question, who is Jack the Earnest. And what is important that these two friends, how then they move on in the stream of the play, and where they make the whole question of earnest a debatable and a farcical one. Thereafter, we move on to Gwendolen Fairfax, who is Algernor's cousin and Lady Bracknell's daughter. Gwendolen is a typical representative of a young Victorian woman, known for fashion, known for mannerism, known for her some sense of obsession with the word earnest, so much so that she says that I would marry a person who has the name Ernest.
And critics call this earnest fixation,
That's
isn't
right.
it?
That's right, that's right. Then we move on to Cicely. Can we have the slide again?
Yeah, Cicely.
Cicely Cardew, she is Jack's ward, the granddaughter of the old gentleman who found and adopted Jack when Jack was a baby. And apart from most of these characters, she is the only one who is very realistically drawn, and that makes her someone more appealing to readers, that she's not located in the mannerism and the fashion world of Victorian hypocrisy. However, she is also somewhere caught in her own fixation of what is called as having an earnest man in her life. Now we come to Lady Bracknell, who is the epitome of Victorian hypocrisy. In fact, through him, the playwriter satirizes on the whims, the fancies, the materialist concern, and the way women look at men. And again, as we see that she is someone who is married to a good family, and that's what she wants, to a good family with a good name. She wants her daughter also to follow the same suit. In fact, she arranges a long list of prospective suitors and has all kinds of possible questions to see that her daughter gets the right choice, the right man a man who is supposedly earnest, but not really earnest in that sense. Anyway, she is a cunning, narrow-minded, authoritarian, and yet the most quotable character in the play. And then we have some other characters. Miss Prism, who is Cicely's governess. She is the endless source of pedantic bromides and cliches. She highly approves of Jack's presumed respectability and harshly criticizes his unfortunate brother. In fact, there is a strong sense of puritanism in her and the way she delivers herself when she tries to groom the women in that family. However, she somewhere also has secretly harbored a feeling for Dr. Chasuble, who is the rector at the estate of Jack, and he's someone who has been given the onus of christening the two fellows with the name Ernest, both Jack and Gwendolyn. Jack and Algernon. We have two more minor characters, Lion, who is a manservant who happens to just come for a short while in Act 1.
He in fact occurs only in the opening scene of the
That's
act,
right.
of Act
And
1.
somewhere he knows about the burn-burning secret of Algernon, the only person who knows that. And then we have Merryman, who is the butler at the manor house, the estate in the Jack's estate in the country, and he appears only in Act 2 and Act 3. What is significant when we look at the plot of the play is the way Jack is living a dual identity, and he is in love with Fairfax,